Welcome back to another episode of Run Till You're Done. Today's guest, I was doing my research and we've probably done about, I don't know, 15 or 20 of the same races, but we never seem to have been on the same year. And one year we were doing the same race, it was D33, and she finished about 2 hours ahead of me. So I'm going to say that I was running with somebody else. But anyway, forget about that. Our guest has went from winning the Anglo-Celtic plate to enforced rest, but we'll get on to that. And she's fighting her way back to fitness again. Not that she took a break during a lot of it, but as I say, we'll find out about it. And I'm going to predict there's going to be quite a lot of giggling during this episode because I think we've got Nikki's running idol with us tonight. We've got Jill Wilson. Welcome,
Hello.
Jill.
Hello. I'm probably the most nervous though.
I'll trust that you've got nothing to be nervous about. So.
Absolutely not. Before we get on to all the absolutely epic stuff Mike has just mentioned there and chatting about that, how did you first come into running?
Oh, see, I've actually ran. It's probably since like late primary school. Just got into it. My mum was always into like tennis. We were always out walking. Just liked being outdoors. And then the school cross country club on, I think it was in P7, and they had like a come along try out. We ran in like the football pitch twice, and then we went along at the nature trail. So it was just maybe like a couple of miles tops, and I was like, I actually love this. Just being out in the fresh air, getting sweaty, working hard, and then went to from P7 up to high school. They had like a feeder race, what they call it. So all the primary schools that were going up to the same high school, we all competed and did a race, which I ended up winning. I've still got the photo, and I'm wearing like must have been one of my mum's freebie t-shirts. It was like a tenant's t-shirt, which is probably not appropriate for somebody at like 12 years old. But yeah, just like that had like lit a flame. So then on and off kind of throughout school, I did track and field. So I did like a bit of like discus, I did long jump, I did hurdles, which I was rubbish at. I liked like 800 meters, cross country, competed in like the Fife and Scottish schools, and then as you do, you kind of come away from it, went to uni, and then joined the police and got back into it through the police. So did like some competitions, like cross countries, 10 mile champs, and met my pal Jack Wilson through that. And then we both joined a running club, and it just has spiraled from running like 5K to running 180 miles over about a 15-year period.
So you went from 5K. What would you, other than school races, what would you class as your first race?
Yeah, so I was looking back at that because I was like thinking, oh, I can't remember when my first race, but I think maybe like 2010. I remember doing the Edinburgh Half Marathon. It was my first half, and it was my first race for Carnegie because I didn't have a vest, but I was in the club. I think it was about 2010, but I'd maybe done like the Dunfermline 10K and stuff before it, and like a few like midweek races, but that's probably the standout kind of first race that I did, and had the worst DOMs and chafing that I can imagine, although things haven't improved because I still get both of those things.
What do you do to avoid them?
Oh, and nut butter, absolutely lagging it on. It doesn't matter like what my weight is like, I will chafe like front and back everywhere. So I have to cover myself head to toe in it.
And you mentioned 180-mile race. What was that?
Yeah, so I did that actually with Derek Fish, who is, you might say he's a good influence or a bad influence, but he had floated the idea and said he was going to do it. It was the Challenge 180. So it was like running the East Highland Way from Aviemore to Fort William, then Fort William down the West Highland Way to Mulgai. So 180 miles. There was only maybe I think about 6 of us did it, but I was going to crew for him. And then I was like, oh, why don't I just run it with you? So we ended up running it together, and it was like 55 hours, I think, that we were running for. But we'd done like so many big days out. He introduced me to Monroe's, loads of like 10-hour days out in the hills, out in the trails, weekends away, drinking, running. So it was like, oh, this will be perfect. And it was just like an ace wee celebration of like all the running that we'd done together over the years. And actually, Martin Heggie was at that race. I think it was one of his big ones, but he had got the worst blisters, and I think he dropped out. I think maybe on the West Highland Way part of it. But yeah, that's how I first got introduced to Martin Heggie. And I was like, this guy is mental in all the good ways. But and then look at what he's done since then. So
How was the navigation through the East Highland Way? I've heard it's like overgrown and really bad.
yeah, it's pretty boggy as well. Like if I didn't have Derek there, because my watch had died about 3 hours in, I had the route on my watch and the battery just the life was sucked out of it. So we knew that we were going to have to stick together anyway. But it's not like it's nothing like the West Highland Way. It's not a well beaten path at all. You're trying to just find your way between points. But some bits of it are absolutely stunning.
And did you have to have crew? You said you were the crew, so did somebody else crew you?
We were so we ran together, but his wife Rona at the time she crewed the first half to Fort William, and then from there Iona Mackay joined, and she crewed with Rona the second half of it. And by that point, like we didn't sleep at all. I was asking for sleep, and he said, "No, no, we'll push on." And then we got, I think, down to Tyndrum, and his van was there, so we jumped in the back there. Maybe had about an hour, and we're like, I don't even think we slept. You know, when you're all twitchy and you're trying to sleep, but you're sore and you're just all kinds of feelings. And got out the van and probably only got to like the roller coaster section, maybe like 3 miles. And I had to have to sleep next to a tree. And then we were like, right, we'll get to Benglass, we'll sleep on the trail. So by the time we got there, I was slapping my face and screaming just to like try and keep myself awake. Because even running, I was like, I'm going to fall asleep while I'm on my feet. And it's not like the best path you've got to watch and the rocks and things. So we got to Benglass, but the midges were out in force. So we're like, well, we can't sleep here. So like motored on, got to the side of the loch, and there's a little bothy, and it was like, you know, you like almost envisaged a 5-star hotel. We were like, oh, amazing, look at this place, it's stunning. It was an absolute hovel, but it's the best sleep we've ever had. Like, set up our sleeping bags, lay down. I think we took about an hour to 90 minutes in there, and the recharge was unreal. And then we just motored on to the finish.
Well, you know that running for 55 hours with just short sleeps, that sounds like a bit like you're signing up for a backyard ultra next.
I do the idea of everybody someone that says, I'm not doing an ultra, I'm not doing a marathon, and then here we are.
Off of the back of that 55 hours, as Mike's saying as well, and the lack of sleep, did you hallucinate much?
Oh, I just was, it wasn't, I don't even think I was hallucinating. I was just so tired, and I couldn't believe that you could fall asleep while you're actually doing something physical. Because I could fall asleep in the car if it's someone, well, even if maybe if I'm driving, but if someone else is driving, I could just be out like that. And I was amazed at how tired, and even for weeks after, because you wake up in your own bed and you're like, oh, I should be running, but you're like, oh, it's finished, like it's done. I'm actually asleep now. It's weird.
Did you take caffeine, or what was your strategy for that?
Yeah, we were doing real food because of like the length of time and the intensity wasn't high. But if it's anything for me, like up to 100k, even maybe 100 miles, I would have gels. But if it's stuff like a 24-hour race and things, I am like breakfast, lunch, tea, and then I would supplement with gels and caffeine. But sometimes too much caffeine gels gets the old palpitations going.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it keeps you awake. I'm like, don't know if it's just actually gets your heart racing.
Yeah, it's not quite good when you're so tired that you can't sleep because your adrenaline's pumping. So
Yeah.
But anyway, leading on from that, a couple of years down the line, you were running Anglo Celtic Plate, and then you ran for GB. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, that was something because I'd done Glenmore 24 back in like 2018. I think I'd done 123 miles, and James Stewart said to me, "Oh, like that distance is good enough for like the 24-hour team." And then just kind of floated that idea about like running for Scotland, and I was like thinking, "Oh, I'm never going to be good enough for that." Like, it's one of those things you shelve, but it is obviously like just maybe like working away at the back of your head. Um, and then I remember it was 2009, end of 2018, actually into 2019, that Adrian Stott and Debbie Cassani had contacted me and said about running the 100k for Scotland, and I was like, nah, that's not my bag at all. And it wasn't actually until the March that I eventually was like, because they were needing someone for the team, like you'd be perfect. And I think it was only like 4 or 5 weeks before it, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll come on the team. But I obviously had been training, just not specifically for that. I was like, oh, I can do the distance. I know that, and I just don't know if I can do the distance and the intensity. But went out quite conservative. But I finished third that year, and I was like, had just an amazing time. Loved running loops, loved the format of it, and I was just absolutely delighted. So that was like my first outing for Scotland, and then got a bit hooked. Debbie contacts you. How do you say no? So, like 2020, I think it was, I was meant to run as well, but then COVID hit, so that got cancelled. But that actually was a blessing. I ended up just being able to batter the training. There was no races, there was no taper, there was no like recovery required. You were just able to really hit hard training. And then end of COVID, I ran again at Dublin for the 100k on the team, and like positioned well there. And then we were back in Perth for 2022. And how do you say no to Perth? It's on home turf. And then yeah, just had an absolute blinder of a race. But I think it's because it's local, everyone's there, and it's just absolutely buzzing. I was loving it.
I had the pleasure. I don't even know if you realise I was there crewing for Kyle when you won that race.
Oh, I think I was like so in the zone. Like I was taking stuff in, but when you're so in the zone, like I was so just concentrating and focused on all my times, all my splits, getting the fuel in, and it's almost like the whole day is a blur, but it's also so vivid, like certain bits of it. It was amazing, and the weather was like spot on as well.
It's good when it all comes together.
It's not often.
I was speaking to a few people as well, doing my research about you, like from that race as well, and they say whoever was there, it was an absolute buzz to see you win like that. How did it feel when you crossed the line? That's you, you've won. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was funny because I'm like a really conservative racer. I'm never at the front early on. I don't get pulled away. I will stick to my splits, and that was my plan. And I think I was in like fourth or fifth place because the English girls, they run in quite a big pack. I usually always just run by myself. If I catch up with somebody, I'll run with them for a bit, chat a few laps, but I really stick to my own strategy. So I tried not to like think, oh, I'm like quite far down here, but as the race progresses, we got kind of 50k and on. It's like, oh, I'm picking off these people, I'm getting a bit closer, and Debbie updates you all the time. She's like, you're X amount of like laps behind or time, or they've just gone through, they look rubbish, like you're looking much stronger. And see, just hearing that, you think, oh, right, perfect. And then I was like 3/4 round one of the laps, and Jack Wilson was there, and she's like, Sam Hammond is right ahead of you. You're going to take her. And she like was there to witness me like come round the corner and overtake her. And she's like, yes. And I'm like, it's my race to lose now because Sam's leading. And I was like, oh no, like that feeling of being then the lead person who's getting chased. Like I way prefer to be chasing down. But once you overtake, you're like, I've just got to carry on. Things still about 20k to go or something. And I was so you're running for your life. You're like, oh my God.
I always find that paranoia, you think somebody's going to catch you, it's a beautiful motivator.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing what you can pull out the bag as well, because you're obviously you're pretty burst, and you're just like you get something else, it just fires something else into you. And even if somebody was to say like, they're right behind you. There's nothing you could do, but mentally, you're like, I'm literally doing all I can. I'm just going to keep going.
But they're probably thinking the same thing. They're, how can I catch them? So
Yeah, I just think pass with conviction, even if you're dying as well.
don't show weakness.
Don't do it. Just smile.
And how do you keep going? You're saying like 20k to go, and that's you, you've passed. Like, how do you tell your brain just keep going, because that's still quite a distance to keep on going.
100k or like 100 miles. When you take that as like one number, you think that what is a long way. There's no denying that. But when you're doing those loops, you're like, right, it's X amount of loops left. It's so I've got about 3 minutes left of this lap. You just break it into like little things that like keep you going. And because you have like pals either side of the course, or you're like, right, it's 4 more gels or however much fluid, or because you don't have music, you're not allowed to wear music now for the ACP. So like I'd been dialed in thinking, right, I've got my tunes, I've got my playlist, and then you get there and they're like, no, Scottish Athletics say no music. So then you're thinking, right, I'm literally in my head for like 7.5 hours, and you have to just be mentally really strong, and try not let that waver. But you know you're going to have rough times. I think I was in the toilet probably in the first 2 hours, maybe about 15 times. I was just peeing. I don't know if it was nerves, if it was like overfueled or what it was, but I was like, right, I'm losing time here. But I had to then remember that other people are going to need to go to the toilet. So just go, you need to go, so you'll catch them up.
Just picking up on you said that no music. I've heard that about Scottish athletics, and I seem to remember about Anglo-Celtic plate. That's not a normal Scottish athletics rule for other races, I don't think. Is it just for the Anglo-Celtic plate, or do you know more?
I think so. In thinking 2019, I had music, but then everyone since then has been no music, and they are obviously closed courses. It's not for road like closures or anything like that. I think it is just one of the rules that has been stipulated for the Anglo-Celtic plate, which the thought of it, I'm like, oh, because I always train with either music or a podcast. So then I'm like on that one day thinking this is something completely different.
Yeah.
But I don't mind it because there's so much going on, and you are just like having the odd blether or looking around, and my brain goes wild when I'm out running anyway. I could have a podcast on, but I've got 110 things going through my brain at one time. I think that's just like processing the day.
And right after you took the win, what happened after that? Like the weeks and even the year, couple of years leading up to your enforced rest, as Mike would have said. What happened in between that period?
So that one, the Anglo-Celtic plate in 2022, because I'd won it, I managed to get a place for the Great Britain team to go out to Berlin in the August. So it was a pretty quick turnaround, though. You're talking, you race 100k in April, and then you're racing another one in August. And bearing in mind, I'd just done one the August before, and I'd run a 24-hour track race. So within the space of 12 months, it's a lot of intensity on the body. Like, I think the mileage is okay, but it's when you're adding intensity and the mileage, that's when the body starts to say, oh, I need a bit of a break. And I have never had an injury the whole time I've been running, touch wood. But I had a bit of a calf strain. Like, I would even say it popped on a run, but I was like in a bit of denial between like the April and August, to the point that I think I missed about 4 weeks of training. And but then I managed to like bring it back. I went out to Italy because I'd become part of our seven, the team that I obviously met Rob on. And we'd gone out to Italy, and I managed to put a good training block together ahead of that, and then came back, and I think I only had a few weeks, and then went out to Berlin. But I didn't go out with like a massive expectation. I thought it's going to be warmer. You're not really racing for a time when you go to a big race like that. You're racing for positioning well as a team, and just really getting round and finishing in a pretty credible time. But I had like ACP was amazing, but this was, don't know what it was. I was just in such a good headspace. My brother had come out, to watch me race, and Faye and Emma, the two girls who ran the 106 marathons, they'd come out as well as a surprise. I met them at the airport before it, so I was like, just totally, I was up for it. I was buzzing, and it was a looped course again as well, and I just had a really like progressive race, and I managed to like chip some time off my ACP time, and it was just crossing that finish line is like the best feeling I've ever had, because I had the flag in my arms and like wearing the GB kit, and I was like, if I never do this again, I will be happy because I've had an opportunity. This is like far beyond anything I ever thought I'd be doing.
And you mentioned you met Rob, and for those that don't know, we're talking about Rob Sinclair, previous guest, as your partner. And
Yes.
leading on from that, and Nikki's got the next question.
So after that, there was some big changes since you started your running, and you got pregnant.
Yes, it did. So Rob and I, this has been like a whirlwind. We're like it's only been like 2.5 years, but yeah, in that time I have moved from Fife to Aberdeen. We've had a little girl who turns 1 tomorrow, and yeah, life has taken a complete like U-turn. I mean, in the best way possible. Like we're sitting here with everything we want, and like you just can't believe it sometimes. But yeah, obviously that impacts on your running and it goes with it. But we were saying the other day, like obviously Mike, you were at the D33 when I was there. That was my first ultra actually. And over the years, Rob and I have like crossed paths at like the West Highland Way, the Glencoe Marathon, the Glenogle, all these like races, but had never really had much conversation over those years. I think being too shy to speak to him.
I don't believe that.
I think you raced the year that he did his first ultra, the Caterin. He won that. That's what got him his place in the West Island Way, and you were doing that race as well. So it's you've always been in the background.
One of attrition that race for me.
So how did you end up meeting with? Was it just at a race or at a running event and just get chatting, and as I say, the rest is history?
Yeah, so we'd both been signed up to that team, which they were like giving us assistance. It was training camps. There was like assistance with kit, with all like nutrition, physiology, sports testing, and things like that. So Rob had missed the first trip, which we went down to. Oh, I forget the name of it. Down near Bristol, and we'd done like some filming for the new team setting up. But he was on a PT course. So I'd never met him then. And then we went down to the lakes in the March and I got chatting to him. And I just, you have an impression of somebody and then you meet him, and Rob could not be like more down to earth. He's like the most humble, like easygoing guy to chat to. And I'd literally never spoken to him, and we just weathered for ages. And I was like, oh, it's really decent. I can't believe he like lives in Scotland and been at all these races. I've never actually spoken to him. And then fast forward to the summer, we went out to training camp in Italy and obviously spent more time together. And yeah, here we are.
You say down to earth, but I'm not sure that that's a proper description of Rob, because he doesn't sit still. He's like a little yappy dog.
He must have to be, Mike, with the speed he runs at. So when you find out that you're pregnant, that something that Mike can't relate to is actually being pregnant. Like, how does that change for you? Because for myself, and I wasn't even running at that point or anything, I was very, very protective and can I do this? Can I do that? How did that all go?
Yeah, so it was a planned thing, and it's one of those things you're like, when's the best time? Because we'd spoken, do we wait another year? Because I had the track 100 planned in the April of that year, and I was obviously going to go for the British record, which I felt like I was in shape for. But yeah, I fell pregnant in the March of 2023, and I was still like, can I maybe still do the track 100? But I didn't want to risk anything. And I was like, running will always be there. I could come back to this. So just really wanted to respect being pregnant. And to be honest, probably was quite looking forward to a bit of the break, because I've probably since about 2019, 2020 been all in on running. It was all these like little goals that I had to get a Scotland vest again and potentially get a GB vest either for the 100k or the 24 hour. And I just thought now is my time to have a bit of a rest. But I've always been a gym goer. I dabbled in CrossFit like 2011 to 2014. I was going to CrossFit like 3 or 4 times a week. I've been back in doing that in like 2017, 2018. So I knew that I could revert back to some gym work, which I do anyway, and I enjoy it. And thankfully, Rob, who's a PT as well, was doing a pre and postnatal course to assist me through the pregnancy. So we kind of had this little project that we could work on together. And it meant I just didn't have to put any thought into my training whatsoever, and Rob would plan it all out for me. So it was just a really good way of like reframing training. It was more like you're going to be doing good movement. It's all about functional movement for being mobile and able through pregnancy to try and then carry that strength into like the recovery after having the baby. I thought I'd maybe be able to run for longer than I did, but I think I got to maybe it was the September of that year I did the Skyline 5k, which was quite a arduous task because I was rather large at that point. And I thought that's probably my last run. So I think I ran for about another week after that. But I say I continued running. I probably did like 10 to 15 miles a week, which was a massive step down from my like 60 to 70 that I'd been doing. But I wasn't really bothered. I was just happy to get out walking, moving. I just like being outdoors, and I like lifting weights. So I was able to get my fix in some way.
Something
Sorry, Mike.
Something I just remembered about that when you and Rob obviously had been told that you were pregnant, and you hadn't been ready to tell everybody else yet because it's probably doctor's orders until a certain time. But you'd came back from wherever it was you were abroad, and Rob said to me on text, "Oh, Joe's not feeling well. She's been ill for about a week now." And I replied, said, "Is she pregnant?" Radio silence for about 3 weeks, and then the announcement was made.
It was one of those things because you feel like it's really obvious when you're a runner and you're like, I'm obviously on Strava, and everybody knew I had this big race coming up as well. So I think I maybe got COVID on the plane home from Turkey as well, because I was very ill, but it just coincided with also being pregnant. I felt like I was just lying to everybody. I'm like, oh, I'm not well, but I was very protective and anxious and apprehensive about announcing anything, and I waited. I think I came to the West Highland Way actually because I was crewing for Jack in the Dunes. I think I'd just had my 12-week scan, and I actually at the time I remember thinking this is so obvious I'm pregnant. I look back at those photos now, you wouldn't even know, but in your own head you're like, oh, I've got this bump, but it just looked like I'd had a big meal. So that was when everybody else kind of found out about it. I felt like it was so obvious, but it probably wasn't.
And later on, now that you've obviously had the baby, question from Rob was, how do you cope with two hyper babies in the house?
Oh, it's not.
One being him and one being...
It is not easy. She is a chip off the old block, let me tell you. I've just had to tell him to calm down because it's bedtime. Because she was fine. He was just winding her up. So yes, he is very hyperactive.
And when he was on the podcast, you asked a question of him, and it was along the lines of, what do you think her chances are given her gene pool? So question to you, what do you think her chances are?
Oh, I would love for her to enjoy the outdoors, and I think if I could just, or both of us can just plant the seed with her, because it's something that kind of came and went from my life. Like I always knew I liked the outdoors, but I didn't quite find my thing until like I really got into the running, probably when I was maybe like hitting my early 20s, and I became a bit more focused on it. So I just hope she gets to explore some kind of outdoor fun and activity that either she'll pick up when she's a teenager or in later life. But yeah, I'd love her to go and annihilate some records and things. Nothing would make me more proud.
And postnatally, how soon after were you back on the fitness? Did you have to go and get postnatal checks from the doctors and midwives and everything like that?
Yeah, so she was a planned section. So after that, like my recovery went quite well from that. There was no complications or anything, but by that point I was 4 stone heavier than I was when I'd fallen pregnant. So you've got that to contend with. So my rebuild was very much centered around rebuilding strength, literally from the inside out. And it was to always be the main focus over the running. The running was then sprinkled in. But I didn't start really any of that till like 6 weeks after I'd had her. But I went and got the mummy MOT, and everything looked to be okay. I had a tiny little separation of my abs, but it was like high abs, more under like my rib cage, because that's where she had nestled for about the last 10 weeks of the pregnancy, upside down with her feet up there. So yeah, everything was as smooth as it could be, but it's really hard to move your body when you're 4 stone heavier than you're used to moving, especially when you're asking it to do like a movement like running, which involves the whole body. I think my first run was like 15 minutes and it was quite hard going. And it's still hard. I still notice that I'm having to work harder than I probably did before, even though I'm back to some reasonable fitness now. But the strength has been a real key factor in making sure that I'm coming back and I'm not developing any injuries, or everything is more aligned. I'm trying to make sure that I've got like strength in the smaller muscles that are supporting muscles. So like my program that Rob had set me in the gym whilst I was pregnant is very different now. This one is more focused on like the movement around running. So I do Uphill Athlete, which is like the Chamonix Mountain Fitness program. It's designed for like alpinists and things. And it's actually really good. I just follow a video online. Most of the movements are body weight, and they're all very functional. And it's just to get you working in all planes of motion. Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's never like a chore for me to do strength work. I don't see it as I could be out running and I'm having to do this. I see it as that is what is keeping me out running now.
So is strength work the main thing now? Is you're going to put running to one side and just get buff?
Yeah, I just get torn. Well, I do it like twice a week usually now. It's funny though because my running volume, I think I'm up to like about 40 miles on a like top end week, which I know it's all like relative to the individual, but I don't know how I ever did any more than that. I know I didn't have a small human to keep alive, and but I also worked full time. Whereas now I'm on maternity leave, I'm not working, so just the juggle is just very different. But it just means that Rob and I have to really be very concise. We sit down on a Sunday night and we look to what the activities are for the week ahead, what everyone's got on, what he's got on, what I've got on, what social things we've got, and we try and build my weeks around that and Rob's as well. So it is very much a busy weekly calendar of plans. And it's not just all centered around training, but it's something that's really important to us both and it's what we like doing. So we make it work.
And maternity leaves, it must be almost over. Do you think that's going to be a shock to everybody's system when you're not going to have time to do anything because you'll be good working and then that's it?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know where this is going to fit into the week. So yeah, I think I'll be like back three days a week during the week, with the odd weekend. But yeah, it'll be involving nursery drop-offs, pickups, just a bit more planning, and then if Freya's going to grow and she's going to have activities of her own and things, so time is just going to change and develop, but we'll just have to work around that. And I think we both just accept that maybe during this time of our life, things just have to be about everyone. They're not about us. But if we can get our own time in amongst that, then that's great.
And now that you have the family unit, I don't actually want to move away from this section quite yet, because you'd signed up to Valencia Marathon, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to brush past this, because what you done the other weekend, that team was amazing. Can we talk about that?
Yeah. So I think April was like 2 weeks old, and our friends Sam and Tessa had signed up for Valencia. And I was like, oh, I'd love to do that. And a year after giving birth, a year is plenty time, which, let me tell you, a year goes very quickly when you're rebuilding fitness and raising a child. So it just somewhat crept up on me. But I had been training. I'd like had a few smaller goals in the 5K, 10Ks, half marathons. And I felt like the rebuild was sensible but progressive at the same time. We just didn't want it to be something that like would be 2 steps forward, 1 step back or anything. And it has all been very much like progressed in the way that, well, I'd hoped it would. So yeah, Valencia, there was bad flooding, so I was like, oh, it's not meant to be. And then they said the race is still going ahead, so we packed up the car, went down, stayed in Edinburgh the night before, went to the airport. We were about to board, and they said there was a delay, so we had a connecting flight from Edinburgh to Dublin, Dublin to Valencia. And we were like, we're going to miss our connecting flight if this is delayed anymore. And then it got further delayed, and we were like, oh no. And the bags, they were already set through. So I was like, are we going to have to go to Dublin to then come back? But long story short, we got the bag off, and then we drove home to Aberdeen. But I had this little backup plan in the pipeline. I had booked the Croft Circuit Marathon when the Valencia floods happened. So I thought, I have a backup should everything go wrong. And Rob had asked me if I'd cancelled it that week because I was going to Valencia. And I was like, nah, I just haven't. I'm just going to wait till we're on the plane. And I'm glad I did, because we came home, repacked winter gear to then go down south. So then on the Saturday we drove down to Darlington, and then the Sunday was the marathon. But Rob was like, "Oh, I've signed up for the 10 miler. I'm going to do the buggy with Ivrea." So we were like, "Oh, hey, so we'll all be on the same track." And I'm thinking, I've raced on a motor circuit like this before. This is my comfort zone. It's tarmac. It's loops. Like, it's going to be nice and cool. It's what we've been training in, and it was just everything I'd like expected. It was amazing. Yeah, and they were romping round, ripped past me. They actually won the 10 mile race, like these club runners, and Rob's got her in the buggy, like trying to sleep. So yeah, it was like, this is amazing.
So the family went home happy because I think you brushed over it there, but you won your race, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, there was 4 women in my race.
As I said to you pre-chat, you can only race against people that turn up. So
yeah.
if nobody else turned up and you were the only one there, you still won. But it wasn't the case. There was other people there, and you still won. So
it was just like, it just went as well as I like. You never know where you're at. I think if you come back from injury or illness, you're just never quite sure where the body's at, or even where to pitch a race. Because I'm like, oh well, what pace do I run at now? Like, how do I know how to do all these things? But there's just something that you like. I just managed to dial in and get it right. You don't always, but I think you just become more in tune with your body the more like time that you have to run, and you just get a bit more used to what you know your body is capable of. Rob always gets it right for me. He's like, "Oh, I knew you would run this time," and I'd written this down. I'd messaged my pal saying that. I'm like, "How do you know?" But he prescribes my training, so the fact that he has that also dialed in just gives me faith that he's prescribing the right things for me.
And as I'd said to you as well, like before we thought Valencia was off and I was wishing you luck, I says it's really exciting because no matter what happens, you're going to PB your first event as a mum.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter time-wise. Well, I wouldn't have thought it would. I don't know, did it matter to you, time?
I think I always have a goal. Whenever I say, "Oh, I'm not like I'm not like that focused on a goal," like it just wouldn't be true to me. I think I always have something in mind that I want to achieve. Um, I always think those goals are quite realistic. I'm never over expect from myself, but I said to Rob, if I can get between 320 and 325, I would be absolutely over the moon. If I was like sub 330, I'd be happy. And those goals kind of became a bit more concise over the time, over the training. And I think when I'd first had her, I was like, oh, if I could go sub 4, I'd be delighted. But I just knew that I was capable of that. And that was on like a really good day. But I mean, if I'd been up, she'd been sick in the bed the night before, like everything that could go wrong, like having to drive down in the car for 7 hours, like all these things. But that's just my life now. Like I'm not able to go and bank a full night's sleep and guarantee a comfy bed and no interruptions. I just have to roll with what I've got now, and like I wouldn't change it. It just is what it is, and it probably makes it even more special when you do achieve something because you think, "Oh God, like how did I manage that with all these missiles thrown my way?"
And I just think if you can win a race with all the things going wrong, everything not going to plan, imagine if you go back to Perth now and you have a Perth day where the weather's fantastic, everything just works. Who
Yeah,
knows what's going to happen?
I know, I know.
And with all the various events that you've ran throughout your life, which one can you pick a favourite?
Oh, it's funny because it depends. Like running for Great Britain was amazing, but doing like like the little personal challenges you set yourself, like it was like post COVID, like running the coastal path in Fife over 2 days. Like some of those things that aren't races have been some of the best days out, or like a big day doing the Memorials 10 with like mates and just things that you're like, oh, that was just it. Even like on Saturday there, Rob and I went and did 10 miles at Benahee in like Storm Dara, and we were like, this is literally the best day out we've had in ages. And there was nothing special about it, but it was just like raw fun on terrain that we just love.
And those
And
macaroni pies looked amazing.
something that you said to me during the summer when I was, I had, I think, 3 or 4 days on the West Highland Way, and you said to me that you just couldn't get fed up running on that kind of trail, and
Oh,
that it kind of leads on to another question from Rob. He's you used to be what he describes as a road chode, and now you're a trail lover. Comments on that?
I know it's funny because I probably wouldn't define myself as like, oh, I'm a road runner, a trail runner. But when you look at my CV, you'd be like, oh, she's just predominantly road or track because that's generally what I've raced on. But I love like any kind of terrain, any running anywhere, and particularly do enjoy like the trails. But I think for ease and time efficiency, to go from your front door, especially living in the city centre, it is just tarmac like 90% of the time. So I think when you do get a chance to go away and enjoy some like, oh, just some fresh air away from the city, it's just an absolute dream. And it probably is more special because it's not all the time now.
Me and Nikki had a conversation, I think it was last week, saying, uh, what type of runner are you? It was a podcast that I'd been on years ago, and are you a trail runner? Are you a road runner? I'm a runner.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. I just like running. So, uh, is that what you're saying now?
Yeah, I would say I just like if you said to me, "Oh, you can't run on tarmac again," I'd be like, not bothered. Like I'll run. If I had to run a treadmill for the rest of my time, wouldn't be ideal. But I think I just, like that escapism. Like as a kid, like you're just like Forrest Gump. You're just running, like not necessarily with anywhere to go, but it's just like that freedom of it. I just love it.
I'm not sure I would go as far as saying I enjoy the treadmill, though. Right. Next question that we've got on our list is crewing, you said that you had, was it Jack's crewing for your 180 race? And no, it was the Anglo Celtic plate that you said she was crewing for. Have you crewed for people? Who normally crews for you?
Yeah, so I crewed for Derek at the Tor, which like that is crewing on steroids. That is amazing. That was a big holiday, big like adventure for me as well. But yeah, I normally like I've had Neil who used to coach me from Run Recover. He's crewed for me. He's a master of spreadsheets and splits and times, and he's so cool and calm. He's amazing to have on crew. And Derek Fish and Iona Mackay have crewed for me quite a lot. I had Debbie Kinsani, which was like, I can't believe Debbie, she's my bottle bitch. Like, this is amazing. How lucky am I? But poor Kyle Gregg, this was at the ACP in 2021. He got some of my bottles, my like salmon flasks, which the tops were like black mold. Yes, that's what upset his race and his tummy during the race. But I don't know. I've been finding them for years. So, yeah, I've crewed Jack at the West Highland Way and Iona at the West Highland Way as well. But the Tor is like up there with one of the best crewing experiences ever.
Just for listeners, the Tor is the Tour de Giants, 220, I think, kilometers starting in Cormuyr, going into the Pyrenees, is it? I
Yeah.
can't remember.
30k, I think it is actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's about a couple hundred miles, which seems mental, but because I'd done the 180 with Derek and he'd said, "Do you want to come out?" It was my first time driving abroad, which was a new experience there. And I was staying in my own accommodation because I was getting myself between like the places that he was going to be. So I remember getting there. I'd parked up in this car park with no lights one night. I couldn't had my phone out trying to find this accommodation, and then this guy from Italy had come up to me. This was in a dark alleyway, and I'm thinking, I know that this didn't feel right. And he's like, "Oh, do you need help?" And I was like, "No, no, I'm fine." I was saying, "Oh, I'm actually trying to look for this place." And he's like, "Come this way with me." And it is. And everything was telling me, do not go with this guy. And I actually text Rob because he was out crewing as well for Natalie Britton. And I was like, I just need to let you know, like, this is what's happening. You don't hear from me. Like, you need to let someone know. But this guy was the nicest guy. He actually wanted accommodation and like knew the women at the B&B. And I was like, I like felt so bad for him. I honestly thought my life is going to end here tonight, but then managed to get the whole crewing experience done. And it was just amazing. It was like being on like me being on a multi-day like adventure with Derek. He was obviously racing the whole race, but I ran up to some points to get to meet him at like the Refugios, had a hot chocolate or a beer, and it was just like we were just out for like this awesome week-long adventure in the Alps. It was amazing.
Yeah, and just in case anybody thought that the Tour or Tour de Giants sounds like a big race, it's actually the babier of the two races, because if you finish the Tour, you're allowed to enter the Tour de Glaciers, which is longer and bigger, and yeah. If you ever think you're doing something big, there's always something worse.
And I think the nav on that one is much more extreme as well. It's like 450 kilometers, and yeah, that sounds like a different ball game. But I think just being involved in that, you know, when you're thinking, "Oh, I would never do this, but I'm happy to crew for it," but then you come away and think, "Oh, maybe I will do this one day." It's just bizarre how your like mind goes from saying never do that, no, I'm happy for Derek to do that, but then I'm like, oh, maybe.
Oh, so it sounds like you're signing up. You got a backyard ultra and a tour to do. Right, okay.
We've
No.
got a one. I can do that.
And for the tour, do you have to have a crew? Is that mandatory?
Nah, you don't, but I actually couldn't imagine how anybody would finish it, because you've got your life bases, they transport your bag from point to point. But in terms of that, like how do you then think, right, I'm going to charge my watch, I'm going to charge my phone, I'm going to sleep, I'm going to set an alarm, I'm going to sort my feet out, change my shoes, and get my food. Like, Derek was just like a zombie or an absolute mess at some of them. But then you're like taking control of the situation, and then honestly, the smell in some of these life bases was like, it was like a graveyard. It was awful. The feet, the sweat, the BO, it was so strong. But it's like, it's almost like ingrained in your nose, and you're like, oh yeah, that was the Tor. It's just
I,
like
I
awful smell.
I remember being up at the top of Aiguille de Midi, which is Chamonix, and nobody was being sick at the time, but all you could smell was that ingrained altitude sickness. Wherever you went, you couldn't go into, like, there was a cafe at the top of the ski lift. It's like, nah, I'll go and sit outside, because it was just, oh, I don't know how anybody could eat in that place.
It's almost like an incentive to just get through something like the Tor as quick as you can before these places get so bad with
Yeah.
like bodies and smells.
But of course, now that you've went through parenthood, well, not through, because there's still a long way to go yet, but you're used to that sort of ingrained, somebody's been sick in here, so now you can cope with the Tor.
Well, I've sometimes got to ask Rob if it's him or if they are like the chat. It's quite a regular question in this house.
So leading on from that, well, it's not leading, it's changing the subject. What's your biggest running achievement?
Oh, oh, it's weird because there's been so many, and there's things like I'm proud of in separate, like different levels. But I think like when you do your first marathon is always pretty special because it's your first time ever like covering that distance, and yeah, just that's been pretty special. Running 100k for the first time, running the 24-hour track race, because you don't know if you can complete these distances, and then you do it and you're like, oh, like I can do that, like what else can I do? Then, or how much faster can I go? So it's not always been the races I think that I've done the best at. It's just maybe been like me saying, oh, I can actually do this, like. And that, like, I've never gone back to the West Highland Way since I had an amazing race in 2017. But I would love to do it again. But I need to find out why I would go back. Would it solely be for a better time? Or, like, what would be my reason? Because that experience was just, like, unreal. I had an amazing race and I felt good. And I ran, like, the last 26 miles with my mate, Martin, because we were both placed at that same bit. And it was just the best, like, feeling ever to like be doing that. And the wind was lashing off our faces, but we were training buddies as well, so we're like, this is just like a day out, it's me and you.
And you say about why you would go back and do certain events. What is your why for running as a whole?
I just love it. I think it's just always been like intertwined in all like aspects of my life. My mum had passed away when I was 16, and it was just a bit of an escape then as well. And it's probably always been the most consistent thing in my life. Like it's always there, whether you need it or don't need it. You can go back to it. It can be as cheap as you want or as expensive as you want, but it's just always there, and it just always makes you feel good as well. I just love it.
And you said about the ACP not allowing headphones, but you normally run with headphones. Obviously,
Yeah.
if there's a podcast or whatever, you're being fed information into your brain that you're probably not even listening to. But what do you think about when you're running?
Yeah, sometimes absolutely nothing. Like I could probably just be completely zoned out. I could even have a podcast in and just maybe think I haven't even listened to any of that. Or I could be completely in tune with it. Like I did the Saltire 12 hour, and I had a crime book on, and I listened to the whole crime. It was like true crime thing. And I listened to that, and it's like digested every little bit of that. And I think, oh, did I even take in my surroundings and scenery? I think it depends what I need that day. Sometimes I need to get out because it's just been like a crazy day looking after Ivrea, and I just need some headspace and to think of nothing, or I need to get out and just process the day, and I might think about absolutely everything or just random stuff that's like crazy things pop into your head, and like, oh, I wonder what colour like the moon is, or like just mental things.
Looking into the future, do you have any dream races or a bucket list of races that you still to tick off?
Yeah, I would love to do the Comrades, and I think I wish I'd looked into that a bit more at the time when I was getting like fast 100k times, and because I would have had a qualifier for it, but it is still going to be there. If I can maybe get another qualifier, I'd love to go back. My mum lived in Durban, and my sister was born there, so it would just be pretty awesome to go out there and do that. And everyone says it's like, whilst it's like pretty flattish road race, it's just really iconic, and it definitely would tick a box for me. I'd love to do it.
And question that can be dangerously depressing, or it can be the most achieving thing in the whole podcast. Is there anybody that you would aspire to or want to run with, whether they're with us, your idol or not? I know Nikki was wanting to run with you because you're her running idol now, but who would you want to run with?
This is going to sound corny, but one of my favourite folk to run with is my pal Jack, and she's just like been somebody I've ran on and off with it for the last like 15 years. And yeah, we used to run at work. We used to go to the club together. Like I'd go around, she'd had her wee boys, and I would go around when she was on her like postpartum fitness journey to get back. And there's just never any like need to discuss pace or route or anything. It just, we literally just laced up our shoes and went, and it was always really good. Like we would chat and we'd not chat and just got into a real rhythm together. And like I probably miss that the most. I do a lot of running on my own, or Rob and I run with the pram with Ivrea, which is amazing. But yeah, I'd love to run. If I could get a weekly run with Jack penciled in, that would be amazing.
And one question I've just thought of that we didn't have on the list, and it's a question that we've started asking now, is how many buffs do you have?
See, I'm going to disappoint you because I'm not. I don't hoard anything. I bin stuff all the time. So you'd probably be appalled that I am rid. But I get quite stressed out when my wardrobe's full, or I'm not wearing stuff. So stuff is either like in the loft, like thinking, oh, I'm not going to use that, and I maybe have a little selection of like 5 bits of headwear, 5 like t-shirts, just what I need right now in my wardrobe, and the rest is away or it gets sent to a charity shop. So I think I've maybe only got about 5 or 6 buffs.
So we would say 5 or 6. The next time that you are going to recycle, because you don't bin them, any buffs, Nikki wants them.
I'm a holder. Last question, unless Mike has got anything else for us. What is next for you running wise? Do you have anything booked, or just continuing to be on the build?
Yeah, I do have a bit of a curveball. I've got the Transgran Canaria Marathon, which is not a marathon, it's about 49k. So yeah, that's in February, so it's not actually that far away. So yeah, I fancied it. It was one that I've like kind of on and off looked at for years, and I was like, I'm fancying that, so I just booked it up. So yeah, that the build is on for that. So that will probably look quite different to what I have been doing. So Rob will be chuffed because it'll be a lot more off road, and he'll be in his element planning my sessions for that because it's right into his wheelhouse.
Is this him just finding out about it?
No. He was very encouraging of it. He's like, yeah, that'll be the main focus. Never mind Valencia. We'll make the main Gran Canaria.
And you might as well get the foreign races in while you don't have to pay for an extra seat for Ivrea, because the prices soon rack up when you're starting to pay for children.
I don't know how I'm going to keep her on my knee till she's 2, though. Sit for very long.
Right, I think that's the end of the questions, and something that you said on chat before we started that we're maybe going to steal for a catchphrase for the podcast was PT and chill. It's just sums up everything that we should be doing and running.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, got to say thank you for Joe for coming on, agreeing, and I'm sure Rob's sitting in the other room desperate to listen to what we're saying. But and thank you to Nikki for being Nikki, and thanks to everybody for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.